the DIPP secretary. But what about North Block? Shireen Bhan has a special guest with her. Over to you, Shireen.
Joining us now is Mr. Shaktikanta, the Economic Affairs Secretary. Mr. Das, appreciate you joining us here on CNBC-TV18. As I said, disappointment because the ranking hasn't really changed or it's up just a notch. But there is an admission that the country has embarked on a fast-paced reform path. And I'm quoting the Doing Business 2017 report, acknowledges a number of substantial improvements made. But at some degree, sir, is there a disappointment, or you believe that because there is a time lag between the reforms undertaken and the implementation, perhaps the ranking will improve next year?
We deserve a higher ranking. But having said that, let me also say that World Bank is a very reputed institution, and we have a long relationship with the World Bank. And today, India is the largest borrower. I mean, we get the maximum amount of loans from World Bank compared to any other country. It's a long relationship. So we sort of respect their decision. But at the same time, we are disappointed, and we also have some concerns about certain methods of arriving at conclusion. For example, you know, when we carry out reforms, they wait for the reforms to get fully grounded and to take deep roots. Now, these are, you know, this is an area of difference of opinion. We feel that once a reform is carried out, some weightage needs to be given. And the weightage can perhaps be increased as we go by and as we fully implement the reforms.
Okay, so you're saying that there is some disappointment as well as some concerns that you've raised specifically with the methodology. But if I were to just look at some of the parameters, sir, and let's talk about the positives, because India's ranking has improved in two parameters on the ease of doing business. Getting electricity, we now are at number 26 in 2017 versus 70 in 2016. Enforcing contracts, we're now at 172 in 2017 versus 178. So those are two areas specifically where the World Bank believes that we have made some improvement in the ease of doing business, which shows up in the numbers as well.
Yeah, I mean, there are positives and there are positive observations in the report, and that is definitely very satisfying. And they have a box item where they have specifically mentioned how India has adopted this whole transformative agenda, how India has adopted this whole reform agenda. So there are many positives in the report which recognize the kind of steps that we have taken. And may I also add that if you look at the history of India over the last 6 or 7 decades, the kind of economic reforms, the kind of economic legislative reforms that we have undertaken in the last 1.5 years or 2 years, it is unparalleled. We have, you know, the GST is moving forward, the bankruptcy law, the Secy Act has been amended, the legal provisions, the laws connected with the DRT, the Arbitration Act has been amended, commercial courts have been set up, the NCLT and the NCLAT have been positioned. So the number of economic reforms and the legislative side which we have done, and now on the anvil is the resolution, the code for resolution of financial firms, which is already on the anvil, and hopefully it will be introduced in the coming session of Parliament. So many changes have happened, and if you compare the kind of economic reforms and structural reforms that India has undertaken in the last 2 years, I think it is unparalleled. Even today, there is no other country which has done so much. And one more point, the overall macroeconomic fundamentals that the growth story which India today can which India today is experiencing, I think that is also unparalleled. So overall, if you see, it's a reform agenda where I think we have a very robust list of reforms which have been undertaken, and there are also other steps which are in the pipeline. So putting all these things together, we feel that...
You know, Mr.
Yeah, I'll just complete.
if I could just take that point forward, sir, you talked about some of the reforms that are in the pipeline. If I were to just look once again at the rankings, for instance, starting a business absolutely flat, 155 this year versus 155 last year. Registering a property absolutely flat, 138 last year versus 138 this year. Resolving insolvency flat, 136 last year versus 136 this year. I'm imagining that this last parameter may perhaps change with the bankruptcy code having been passed by Parliament. But in terms of what more we can do to actually improve the ease of doing business, what is in the pipeline, sir?
No, it is a continuing process. Improving the business environment and doing business. It is also, it depends on the kind of states, the kind of initiative which the states take. For example, take the case of property registration. Now, property registration is something which lies entirely within the domain of the states. And we are working closely with the various state governments. The DIPP is working with the various state governments very closely to try and impress upon them to improve the entire processes connected with that. And you mentioned about getting electricity connection. Now that is again something which comes in the purview of the states, and we have been able to work with the states and we have improved them. One more point which I would like to also mention and flag here is that many of the works are within the domain of the states. We are working with the states, and we naturally, the states will have to be completely brought on board. Insolvency, yes, you are right. I mean, the law has been enacted, and we thought that some weightage should have been given to that. But yes, going forward, once it is fully implemented, which we expect should happen in the next 2 to 3 months, we expect that definitely next year that will contribute substantially to improvement in our ranking in the ease of doing business.